9 people? That's just too many. What do you think this is, a baseball team? I've always had a dream since I was a child. A cute house like the ones in picture books, with a white dog in the yard. But reality isn't always so sweet. I finally managed to get my own house. But when I returned from work, it had transformed into something like a dormitory. I won't forgive them for this. My name is Mary, a 32-year-old office worker. I've been focused on my career, but since my late 20s, my friends started getting married one after another. There were months when wedding gifts really added up to my expenses. Feeling a mysterious urgency, I started trying my hand at dating.
Mary, when are you going to give me grandkids?
Every time I visited home, my dad, David, would say this, and it made me so uncomfortable that I gradually stopped visiting as much. My mom passed away when I was young, so I grew up with my dad, my brother, and my paternal grandparents. My brother married early and built a house near our childhood home. He has 2 daughters, my adorable nieces. I've got cute nieces at my brother's place. Isn't that enough for you?
But you, Mary.
We always ended up arguing about it. Then, after a while, my dad was involved in a traffic accident. By the time I got to the hospital, he was in a very bad state. My energetic father quietly passed away while my brother's family and I watched over him. Dad, I had someone I wanted you to meet. Actually, at that time I had a boyfriend, introduced to me by a friend. He had just proposed, and we'd decided to marry. He was a bit of a show-off, but a kind man. His name was Richard. Now with both my parents gone and my brother having his own family, it's gotten lonely, hasn't it? I muttered this, stroking my cat Lucy after returning home from the funeral.
Mary, you're not alone. You're going to be a part of my family.
Richard, sitting next to me, gently held my hand. He came to check on me, worried about how I was doing.
Let's build a happy home together.
I thought I could have an ordinary happiness. Little did I know back then what would happen. Welcome! It's a bit cramped though. I visited Richard's family home for a family meeting. Patricia, his mother, spoke plainly and was full of energy. I hesitated as I entered the room, thinking it would be just the in-laws, but it was crowded with in-laws, step-grandparents, Richard's brother Charles, and his wife Sarah, and their kids, Thomas and John. Nice to meet you. Wow, that's a lot of people. The house, built by James, Richard's father, felt somewhat run down. Honestly, it was old, but the family welcomed me warmly, easing my nerves. On the way back in the car, speaking of which, there were so many people today. Christmas or Thanksgiving must be quite an event, I said to Richard, who laughed in response.
It really is cramped there. Can't believe they manage to live like that every day.
Hearing this, I was genuinely surprised. Richard's family home was never really spacious. I thought it was just a temporary gathering. 8 people in that house? Wow, that's something. Richard said it was originally just the 4 of them, his in-laws and step-grandparents. But then Charles, who couldn't hold down a job, moved in one day with Sarah and their kids without asking.
Charles will probably move out once he finds a stable job,
Richard said with a laugh. Back then I just thought Richard's family had its challenges, nothing more. After marriage, Richard and I, along with our cat Lucy, lived a peaceful life without kids yet. Richard was fairly helpful around the house, and Lucy was fond of us. As for his family, Charles and his family were still living in that house. The walls were covered in children's scribbles, and Patricia laughed, saying she gave up on cleaning them long ago. Sarah, Charles's wife, always looked tired. She was older than Charles and close to my age, so we became friends quickly. "Hey, Sarah, hurry up!"
"Mary, don't just stand there. We're out of beer."
Whenever I visited, it seemed like Sarah and I were the only ones not sitting down. We were constantly busy, and I wondered if this was our fate. But the thought of Sarah doing this every day was honestly frightening. Sarah worked full-time, filling in for Charles, who hardly worked. I hesitated to ask, but finally did. "Have you ever thought about leaving him?" "I've heard that before." "Well, it's tough as it is, but we have kids, and he used to be so kind." I couldn't see any good in Charles, but I guess they had their reasons. That's what I thought. It was around this time.
"How about we build our own house?"
Richard suddenly suggested. I was surprised, but also happy. Actually, I've had a small dream since I was little. I'd always dreamed of living in a quaint house like those in storybooks, with a white dog in the yard. I have a white dog in the garden. I'd never told anyone, but when I shared this dream with Richard, a bit shyly.
"That sounds great,"
he said. We spent our free days visiting model homes, choosing a housemaker, and a year later, our dream home was completed.
"We've got to make sure we keep up with the mortgage,"
Richard said. "Absolutely," I replied with a smile. On the first weekend after moving in, Richard's family came over for a housewarming party. "Here, Joseph, hand over the gift. We're coming in." "Oh, what a lovely house!" Patricia seemed quite pleased, as if it was her own home. I smiled politely.
"Look, it's a celebration!"
And then Joseph handed me 2 cans of beer, looking like he'd just bought them. I mean, seriously? Charles wandered around the house and finding our bedroom exclaimed, "Oh, this bed is super comfy!" Saying that, Charles started rolling around on the bed. The kids, following their father's lead, got excited.
"Look, there's a cat!"
They ran around, chasing our pet cat Lucy. Lucy is friendly, but she had never met so many people at once, so she got scared and hid in the back of the room. Poor Lucy. I glanced at Charles and Richard, who had already started a party with the in-laws. "Mary, Patricia is insisting on appetizers quickly. Can I use your kitchen? And sorry about scaring Lucy," Sarah said apologetically. Why is someone as nice as her with a guy like that? I had grown to care for Sarah like a real sister. "I'll handle it, Sarah. You relax," I said, but she still helped with the cooking while managing the kids. The step-grandparents were always quiet, almost like dolls, not talking much. But they said, "What a lovely home, right, James?"
"Yeah, sorry for the noise,"
James replied, even though the loud ones were the in-laws. The step-grandparents were the ones with common sense in that house. In other words, the odd ones out were the in-laws, Charles, and probably my husband Richard too. From then on, the in-laws and Charles would visit our house almost every weekend. They partied till dawn, so loud that we got complaints from neighbors and even the police ones. The step-grandparents, Sarah, and the kids hadn't visited our house since the housewarming, but the in-laws didn't hesitate to put me to work. I was at my wits' end. Richard had also started showing his true colors. Once, I had a cold. I was too weak to prepare dinner and asked Richard, who was home early from work, to pick something up. He came back with 2 hamburgers. I couldn't even think of eating them. "Why hamburgers? I can't eat this right now," I said without thinking, instead of getting angry.
"What are you talking about, Mary? You need to eat to get your strength back,"
Richard said. "What? If I had the energy to eat that, I wouldn't have asked for help in the first place. I thought to myself, by the way, when Richard was sick once, "Want a hamburger?" I asked him sarcastically. His response was,
"No, that's ridiculous. Are you trying to annoy me?"
That's what I said. In short, this family was self-centered and lacked empathy. They were done for as people. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. I'll make sure you all get what you deserve. With that thought, I smirked wickedly. A few days later, I had a business trip scheduled. On the morning of my departure, "Well, I'm off then," I said cheerfully to Richard.
"Was your business trip starting today? What a coincidence. Sarah is also on a business trip from today,"
said Richard. "Really? I had no idea. What a coincidence," I replied.
"Mom said they'd be in trouble without someone to take care of the house."
Richard laughed mockingly, making me think, what a jerk. I was busy during my time away from home. Days flew by quickly, and before I knew it, a lot of time had passed. A major typhoon hit, and I contacted Richard.
"We're fine, but the family home had some serious leaks,"
he replied. Thinking of the old family home, I felt it was understandable. The day I returned home arrived. As I walked from the nearest bus stop to my house, I heard loud, unrefined laughter echoing in the residential area. Is someone having a barbecue in their yard? The noise was that loud. This will surely attract complaints from the neighbors. Wait, what? I was shocked. The loud voices were unmistakably coming from my house. As I cautiously opened the door, I found many bags in the entrance, and the walls were covered in graffiti. Stunned, I was at a loss for words.
"Hey, Mary, welcome back!"
A drunken Richard greeted me. Frustrated by his insensitivity, I entered the living room to find equally drunk in-laws and Charles, with Sarah making appetizers for them in the kitchen. The step-grandparents were quiet as usual, and the kids were happily drawing on the living room walls. Then there was another young woman I didn't know. Overwhelmed by everything, I felt my mind about to snap. "What is all this?" I asked Richard calmly, trying not to get emotional.
Didn't I tell you? The family home had leaks because of the typhoon."
I heard that part. And then? Richard's story was this. The family home had a massive leak, and the in-laws, having nowhere else to go, temporarily moved into our house. Without Sarah, who was away, the in-laws, Charles and Richard, decided,
"We thought, why not live here?"
Richard said proudly. What? Even with this explanation, I was baffled. To my silence,
"It's fine, we're family. We have extra rooms, no problem,"
the in-laws added, smiling.
"It's all right, Mary. The walls got a bit dirty, but it's just kid stuff,"
Charles said nonchalantly. And who is that woman? I asked about the woman lounging on the sofa, fiddling with her phone.
"Oh, that's Karen, a mutual friend of me and Sarah. Right, Sarah?"
Charles asked her. "Yeah, that's right," she answered with a smile.
"This girl, Karen, was kicked out by her parents, and Richard said it was okay for her to stay."
"Thanks in advance," the not-so-bright-looking girl replied, leaving me utterly confused. In our not-so-spacious living room, there were 9 adults and 2 children. The room was a mess, the walls covered in scribbles, making it look nothing like a new house. The family was loud like a dormitory. I couldn't help but lose my temper. Seriously? 9 people is too many. Are you guys planning to start a baseball team or what? Then I realized something. Hey, where's Lucy? Our pet cat Lucy was nowhere to be found. When I asked Richard and the others, they all claimed ignorance, while frantically searching for Lucy.
Lucy, huh? Dad opened the window to smoke and she ran away,
Thomas told me. Charles glared at the boy as if he had said something he shouldn't have. What were you thinking? I told you to be careful with the windows, I said, near tears. Richard, looking annoyed, said,
Oh, come on. It's just a cat. We can get another one. What's with you? If you're unhappy, we can just get divorced, you know?
He said it with such a disdainful face. You just said divorce? I asked.
Yeah, I did. I might consider not doing it if you apologize to us.
Richard, along with the in-laws and Charles, seemed confident that I wouldn't go through with a divorce. I replied, Oh, really? Well, then here, write this. I slammed down the divorce papers I had prepared. My section was already filled out. I fetched my pre-packed bags from my room. Done? Why haven't you written it yet? I'm busy, you know, and said coolly to Richard. They were all shocked by my preparedness. Angrily, Patricia said, Richard, divorce this woman already. We've built the house, so she's useless now. Patricia said that. Realizing too late, Richard said,
Right, Mary. You'll regret divorcing me.
But I had no regrets. What are you talking about? You're the one who's going to struggle. Just write the divorce papers. Once Richard finished writing, I snatched the papers and put them in my bag. Then I went to Charles and said, Here, you need to write this too, handing him the divorce papers. He laughed.
What? When did I marry you?
Looking at the filled-in wife section, Charles said,
Hey, Sarah, this is...
Sarah coldly stared at Charles and said, I'm divorcing you. Write it now, please. To which Charles exclaimed,
Sarah, bite the hand that feeds you, huh?
Joseph was talking nonsense. From my perspective, Sarah had been living like a slave in her in-laws' house. The money she earned was mostly taken by Charles, leaving only a little for living expenses. The money let Charles do whatever he wanted, and the not-so-bright girl in front of me, she was Charles's mistress. Mary, I think my husband is cheating on me. Sarah had confided in me just before Richard suggested building a house. Sarah had been enduring it all for the sake of her children. But recently, Charles had even started selling Sarah's belongings and the kids' toys for his own gain. She had reached her limit. Then Sarah told me a story. After hearing Sarah's story, I was furious. From that day, Sarah and I started planning our divorces. Sarah gathered thorough evidence of the affair. Her recent business trip was a lie. We met halfway to look for a new place to live. Like me, Sarah's parents had passed away, and she had no relatives to turn to. However, a close friend offered her a job at their shop in another state. It was a good location, and our preparations went smoothly. All that was left was to present the divorce papers. I want to get some people out of that hellish house. Sarah had made up her mind and was incredibly strong. She had a strong core, but had been used by her in-laws like she was brainwashed. Thinking it would look suspicious to return together, Sarah went back first. She soon contacted me, informing me about the takeover of my house and Charles's brazen mistress moving in. All our conversations and actions until then were a performance. Knowing what was going on, I told Sarah, We're not living in that house anymore. Let the kids draw on the walls all they want. That's what I told him. Charles, thinking he could now openly live with his mistress, happily signed the divorce papers. Let's go, Sarah. James and everyone, it's time to leave. The step-grandparents stood up and followed Sarah and her children to the door.
Living with people like you, I had given up on life, but Sarah opened my eyes. Do as you please now,
James said, glaring at the family, and left with his great-grandchildren. The in-laws had been taking money from the step-grandparents as pensions. They were truly awful people. Well then, take care, we said as we left like a storm.
You'll regret this.
The family laughed as we left, but we ignored them. Months later, Richard contacted me. Oh, I forgot to block him. I could guess the content of the call, so I answered.
Mary, come back!
Richard sounded desperate. I barely contained my laughter. Come back? We're strangers now, I replied calmly.
Let me talk. Mary, what do you mean? Why aren't you paying the mortgage?
Patricia's voice came through, probably snatching the phone from Richard. What are you talking about? I have no idea. I played dumb, while Patricia sounded frustrated. Apparently, the house's mortgage had already fallen behind last month. When I pressed Richard, he claimed I hadn't been paying the mortgage. What an inconvenience. While I remained silent, Patricia kept talking like a machine gun.
First of all, this house, you guys had a combined income of $75,000, right? We could have built a better house. We built this as a new home, but it's not what we expected.
Originally, they had planned to take over the house. Sarah had informed me of their discussions. Yes, that's true. But with Richard's $30,000 salary, the bank wouldn't lend us more. If we had taken a joint mortgage, maybe we could have gotten a better house. Hearing this,
Richard, you lied!
I could hear Richard and Patricia arguing on the phone. I ignored them, ended the call, and finally blocked his number. Richard had a pretentious personality. Richard always wanted to impress others, especially outside his family. When he suggested building a house, I already had divorce in mind. I told him, a friend's husband got a mortgage on his own. How cool is that? I heard these stories like a spell. Richard, wanting to show off, opted for a solo mortgage. I had to hold back my laughter. He probably didn't tell his family because he was afraid of them knowing the truth. But I didn't care. The house was built to Richard's taste. I had no attachment to it anymore. Richard hadn't cheated. But there were no alimony or penalties in our divorce. So, to spite him, I left him with the mortgage debt as my revenge. Let him suffer. And I was able to rescue Sarah, whom I cared for like a sister, from that house. That was my main goal. Later, they couldn't pay the mortgage and the new house was repossessed. But it was a mess inside, with scribbles everywhere, and walls yellowed by cigarette smoke from Charles and his mistress. It didn't look like a recently built house. Richard had to rent a cheap apartment and Joseph and Patricia ended up moving in with him. They'll probably never leave him alone, like parasites. I don't care they're strangers to me now. The only good thing about my former in-laws was that the children weren't affected. Otherwise, they were the worst. Sarah, as Charles's ex-wife, successfully claimed alimony through a lawyer. She had to borrow money, but managed to pay it off. I'm glad for her. Charles and his mistress became outcasts in their community and are now missing. They haven't repaid their debts, confirming how awful they are. Sarah is happily working at her friend's place. Her kids are doing well too. I hope they find happiness this time. James and Barbara seem brighter now, like a weight has been lifted. They sold the old family home and are enjoying their retirement in a distant place with their savings. That's great news. As for me, I've requested a transfer to a local office. I was reunited with Lucy, my cat. Thanks to social media, someone in the neighborhood had found and taken care of her. It's good she's friendly. Now, I live alone in my late father's house. With my brother's approval, I'm saving to build my dream house. And someday, I hope to introduce someone special at my father's grave. Today, I'm working hard towards that goal.
Sarah, that joke's a bit too much.
Lucy's right, though. $20,000 is a bargain for looking after us in our old age. I don't mind going to a facility when I'm old. I'm fine either way.
I felt sad seeing how different Lucy's father was. Even worse, Tommy was laughing along with Lucy, making me feel pitiful. Lucy lacks any humility. You two are really embarrassing, just remember this. I decided to give up on these two. I'm Sarah, a seasoned occupational therapist with over 30 years of experience. This year, I turned 55 and I've started feeling more aches in my legs and back. Thanks to my skill, I give myself massages every day, which surprisingly reduces the longevity of the pain. I still work hard, not letting the younger ones outdo me. My husband is always busy, barely ever at home. He's currently on an assignment abroad. We met in a park. That day, I was feeling down about a mistake at work. I sat on a park bench, lost in thought, letting the night breeze comfort me. When I finally calmed down, I noticed a man sitting on the next bench. That was my husband. It's a common story, but we started talking and exchanged numbers. His work involved traveling between America and abroad, so we couldn't meet often, but he was diligent in keeping in touch and trustworthy. When Tommy was born, he even left his job overseas to come back home, showing how much he valued family. Decades into our marriage, we still keep in regular contact. Our marriage is good, but there is one problem: Tommy. Since Tommy's childhood, we both worked, leaving little time together. We went out on days off, but on work days, he often stayed home alone. Out of guilt, I spoiled him, and before I knew it, he started treating me like an ATM. I don't even know where Tommy works now. He only talks to me about money.
Hey, I need like $300.
Didn't I give you money recently? What are you using it for?
That's none of your business.
I won't get mad. Just tell me why.
Shut up. If you don't want trouble, give it to me now.
Alright, as I reluctantly took out the money, Tommy snatched it and left. Lately, the frequency of his money demands has increased. All I can do is heave deep sighs. Tommy's nothing but a headache. A few days later, on my day off, I was relaxing on the sofa. Then, surprisingly, Tommy, who usually comes home at midnight, returned in the afternoon. Welcome back, you're early today, and who might this be? Behind Tommy stood a petite woman with a flashy appearance radiating a strong aura.
I'm marrying her. From today, she'll be living with us.
Wait a minute, this is too sudden. I can't keep up. Can you sit down and explain properly?
This is why it's tough with old people who can't understand quickly. Just say okay, that's all.
As I stood there confused, the woman calmed Tommy down. Tommy, Sarah is right. Let me introduce myself properly.
Fine, if Lucy says so.
Tommy and the woman sat on the sofa and she began to explain. My name is Lucy. My mother left home as far as I can remember. My father's name is Bob. I was raised by him and still live with him. He fell ill last year and is still battling the disease. I met Tommy at a bar and we hit it off, deciding to get married. Do you approve? Despite her appearance, she seemed to be a well-spoken young lady. There were many things I wanted to ask, but her father's names caught my attention. Lucy, thank you for sharing, but I can't approve yet.
Hey, I didn't ask you for your opinion. It's already decided.
Tommy, this is something I can't compromise on. I need to talk with Jim and her father too. Mentioning my husband silenced Tommy. He has always been strangely intimidated by my husband and seemed to reluctantly agree. I decided to send her home that day. When I discussed Tommy's situation with my husband, he said he could return temporarily as his work had settled. Later, I visited Lucy's home, knowing her father was ill and unable to go out. There, I saw a man I knew well. Her father was one of my patients. He's a very friendly and cheerful person who shared many stories during treatment, including ones about his daughter. I never imagined our paths would cross this way. The conversation went smoothly and we agreed to an engagement, putting the marriage on hold. Tommy and Lucy didn't seem to fully understand, but they appeared to accept it for the time being. However, my husband and I were soon to learn about Lucy's spiteful nature. My husband went back abroad. As soon as he left, Tommy started to throw his weight around again. Lucy began coming over more often, and day by day her belongings increased in the house. I couldn't tolerate her treating my home like hers and decided to speak up. "Lucy, can I have a word?" "What is it?" "I don't mind you relaxing here, but you're overstepping your bounds. You're engaged, not married, and I haven't agreed to you moving in. Engagement is the same as marriage, right? So this is my home too, isn't it?" "Wait, hold on. Do you understand what engagement means?" "It's the same as being married, right?" I never imagined she would think engagement and marriage were the same. I was about to correct her when my eldest son interrupted.
Enough! Is this the start of harassing Lucy? She's right, so stop bothering her. All people should just keep quiet.
"Tommy, you don't understand the meaning of engagement either."
This is pointless. Lucy, let's go somewhere else.
Tommy and his girlfriend ignored me and went out somewhere. I never thought even my own son wouldn't know the difference between engagement and marriage. For now, I sent a detailed email to my husband and pondered over how to inform her father. Someone help me. I felt almost crushed by my own inadequacy as a parent. Neither of them returned home that day. The next day, I went to work as usual and was in the rehabilitation room. My next patient was supposed to be her father. As I was preparing for the session, an operational message came in. It stated that her father had been urgently hospitalized and today's rehabilitation session was cancelled. I knew his condition wasn't great, but I didn't think it was so urgent. I wanted to visit his room right away, but since it was still my working hours, I decided to focus on my job. After finishing work without any overtime, I changed and went straight to his hospital room. There, connected to oxygen masks, IVs, and various machines lay a frail and changed Bob. "Bob?" When I softly called out to him, he slowly opened his eyes and searched for me. As our eyes met, he gave a weak smile.
Sorry to be in this state. I was looking forward to rehab today.
"Bob, we're always here for you. Right now, let's focus on getting better every day."
I have a sense of my own body. The doctors told me to be prepared, but I'm at peace now since the biggest problem I had is settling down.
"Is it about Lucy?"
Yes, Lucy takes after her mother and I was worried, but knowing she's marrying Sarah's son, I felt she'll be okay. She's a handful, but please take care of her.
I always felt energized whenever Bob came for rehab. "Lucy will be fine. It's my son who's more of a worry, might cause you trouble." I spent some quiet time with him, holding back tears. He raised her alone after her mother, known for lavish spending and infidelity, left them. One day, after being confronted, she disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only an unmarked envelope containing divorce papers. He had expressed regret in the past, feeling he had made his daughters suffer in their father-daughter household. He was diagnosed and notified for his condition a year ago, leading to frequent hospitalizations and surgeries, which is why he started rehab with me as his therapist. This situation was incredibly hard for me, his therapist, who had worked hard alongside him. As we chatted idly, I was lost in memories when I noticed he was getting tired. "I should leave now. Rest well tonight. I'll come again tomorrow."
Thank you for coming. I'll be waiting.
A few days later, he passed away. Right after Bob's death, Lucy and Tommy approached me. "We don't have enough for the funeral expenses. Could you help us out?" "How much do you need?" $20,000. $20,000? All right, I'll lend it to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
They both thanked me. I then asked them about the funeral plans. Their response left me with doubts. We decided on a small family-only funeral. Really? That cost $20,000?
It's necessary, right, Lucy?
Yes, it is. We are planning to do it the day after tomorrow, so please by then. Okay, I'll let Jim know too. Mentioning my husband changed Tommy's attitude.
No need to tell Dad. He won't make it back from abroad in time for the day after tomorrow.
Still, I have to inform him you two are engaged after all.
Fine, but tell him he doesn't need to come to the funeral.
Got it. I reluctantly agreed, though still unconvinced as it was their decision. On the day of the funeral, I was appalled by the shabby venue and arrangement. Despite being told it was a family funeral besides us, there was literally no one else. I wondered if there were no close relatives but decided it wasn't the right time to ask. The funeral proceeded briskly and everything was over in no time. Still unsatisfied, I asked Tommy to show me the bill. He just yelled and wouldn't discuss it. I tried asking her, but she refused. Their behavior seemed odd, but I thought maybe they were just overly sensitive due to her family's loss. However, that night something more shocking appeared. They asked me to approve their cohabitation and marriage. I firmly said it wasn't the day to discuss such matters, but they didn't seem to listen. Somehow we agreed to talk about it later, but a few days later, movers arrived at the front door. Amidst my confusion, they followed the couple carrying boxes into the house. Wait, what's going on?
Yeah, we got married, so we decided to move in. Hope that's okay.
What are you doing deciding on your own? This is troubling.
Shut up.
Tommy shoved me against the wall with his elbow. I hit my head and back, causing severe pain. Unable to move, I could only watch in silence as they kept bringing in their belongings, while my eldest son clicked his tongue and forcefully dragged me to the sofa. In no time, the movers finished and left.
Next up, unpacking.
Yeah, let's get this done quickly. Lucy cheerfully followed Tommy, seemingly unconcerned about me. Lucy's behavior as if she owned the place continued, and the respectful impression I once had of her crumbled. The two ignored my presence, still unable to move from the sofa. My head, previously in a whirl, cleared up, but I couldn't find any answers. Finally able to sit up, I leaned against the sofa and decided to ask them directly. Why didn't you consult me? And Lucy, it hasn't been long since you and Bob parted. There are procedures to follow. Wouldn't it have been better to wait a bit longer? The two, engrossed in the TV, glared at me, clearly annoyed. I don't care about that. My dad left me alone and disappeared. He was always nagging and I feel relieved now. I don't understand the procedures, so anything will do. Just anything? I can help, so let's do it properly.
Why don't you do it all then? It's best to leave these things to old people.
That's a good idea. Sarah, please take care of it. That's impossible. I can't do anything without Lucy's involvement, please. Shut up. It's my business, so don't interfere. Lucy yelled, kicking the table. I was shocked into silence. They seemed to think that they had the upper hand, pressing their point. This will be our home, so Sarah, please don't interfere. This house was built by my husband and me. It's not yours.
Then change the ownership to us and you leave.
How dare you? Jim won't stay silent and I paid for Bob's funeral in full. I don't recall owing you anything for a mere $20,000, Lucy retorted with a laugh. I was stunned. What on earth is Lucy going to say?
What? Lucy said it right. $20,000 is nothing for taking care of our old age.
Yeah, though we might not really take care of you.
If you don't like it, go to Dad's.
Realizing further discussion was futile, I made my decision. Fine, I'll happily leave. So I submitted a leave request at work and went overseas to join my husband. I had informed him the day before flying. He was waiting for me at the airport, and on the drive to his house, I told him everything that had happened. He sighed heavily while driving, making me feel somewhat guilty. I'm sorry. If I had raised Tommy better, this wouldn't have happened.
It's not your fault, Sarah. I'm the one to blame for making you juggle work and parenting alone while I couldn't help. I'm sorry.
No, that's not true. Your regular contact was a great support for me, thank you.
I see, but I still regret not being there. Let's think carefully about what to do next.
Yes, we need to correct their lack of integrity for Bob's sake.
Agreed.
After arriving at my husband's home and resting a bit, we discussed our next steps.
I wonder if the $20,000 they demanded was really used for Bob's funeral.
I have been doubtful about that too, considering the venue and other expenses. $20,000 seems excessive. I think they used it for Lucy's moving expenses or something else. They didn't even show me the bill. The most suspicious part was their insistence on not inviting you, Jim. They must be hiding something.
It's hard to say, but their insistence on not inviting me is too suspicious. Tommy has always been secretive with me. Sarah, did they do anything else to you, like causing injury or verbal abuse?
Actually, I told him about being verbally abused and demanded money by Tommy regularly. I also detailed a painful experience during the move, speaking candidly about everything. My husband's face was a mix of anger and sadness.
I'm sorry for all the hardship. Are you okay physically?
I'm still a bit sore, but I'm fine.
All right, I have a reliable contact who can help us. Can you give me some time?
Okay, I'll take some rest while I'm here. About a week later, an envelope arrived for my husband. It was thick, and I was curious about its contents, but I decided to wait until he came home. After he returned and changed, he sat next to me on the sofa and opened the envelope. It contained a CDR and some documents. He skimmed through them and muttered,
I see.
Then he handed me the documents. I couldn't believe what I read.
The funeral cost only about $3,000 and the rest went to moving expenses, debt repayment, gambling, and buying a used car. It's unbelievable. Lucy neglected Bob's care, left him to weekend while she enjoyed herself. Tommy turned a blind eye and contributed using the money for gambling and accumulating debts. It's almost laughable how bad it is.
I was speechless, just like my husband. The CDR contained photos and data evidencing their gambling and the used car parked at their house. I was impressed by the thorough investigation.
Well, we have the evidence. It's time for them to take responsibility. Sarah, are you ready?
Of course, that's why I came all this way. Let's teach those two a lesson they won't forget. From that day, we began taking action. My husband also took leave and we returned to America together. After arriving, we immediately went to the government office to complete some procedures. Then, we met with the person my husband said he could trust, a lawyer who had gathered all the documents for this case. The three of us discussed specifics. The lawyer promised to prepare everything for a particular day and then left. That day finally arrived. After receiving a call from Tommy and Lucy, my husband and I entered my former home for the first time in a while. As soon as we arrived, they angrily confronted us at the entrance.
Hey, the electricity, water, and gas are all cut off, and what's this about taxes? We weren't informed.
What's going on, Sarah? It's in your name, so pay it. They spoke rapidly, but Tommy paused upon noticing my husband falling silent. Lucy, surprised by his presence, also closed her mouth. With them quiet, my husband spoke up.
Glad to see you're well. Can we come in?
They led us into the house, unaware of the trouble awaiting them. Inside, my husband silently handed them photos and documents. Their faces paled immediately, likely realizing the situation. My husband sighed heavily.
So it's true then. What are you two grown adults thinking?
It had been so long since I'd seen my husband this angry that I was taken aback by his intensity.
Anything you want to say? It was just a game. You understand, right, Dad? Just youthful folly?
Me too. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. Mom, you can come back home. Please overlook this just once. Please?
Please, from me too. They apologized profusely, but it was too late. Tommy, I'm not coming back. This is your house now. The property is in your name, just as you wanted. I decided to spend my time with Jim.
Wait a minute. What am I supposed to do now? Tommy, don't involve Sarah anymore. I'm cutting ties with you. Don't contact us again and expect to pay compensation for how you treated Sarah. You need to take responsibility as an adult. No, please, I was wrong. Forgive me. Help me.
Sarah, Jim, please don't abandon us. They clung to our feet, crying and pleading. For a moment, I considered forgiving them, but I had already made up my mind with my husband. I steeled my heart and pushed them away. My husband stopped them as they tried to cling to us again.
Goodbye, farmer's son.
Leaving them wailing and crying like children, we walked out of the house according to the lawyer who helped us. Tommy managed to land a job after many interviews at reputable companies, but until his first paycheck, they had no electricity, water, or gas. He also cut ties with his previous companions. To sever this relationship, Tommy suffered injuries and now walks with a limp due to the aftermath. Lucy found a job too and is contributing to the household. After Bob's death, Lucy carelessly signed some documents which are now causing trouble. She unknowingly agreed to inherit the estate, including her childhood home. Confused, Lucy is struggling to decide what to do with the property. They lack the knowledge to handle the situation and are still perplexed about how to proceed. Even at their new jobs, their bad attitudes and frequent mistakes have made them outcasts at work. Naive and problematic, they have been on the brink of dismissal several times. It's only a matter of time before they lose their jobs. As for me, I was able to receive substantial compensation from them for their mistreatment and deceit. Once things settled with them, my husband and I built a small new house. He still travels between America and overseas, so I'm often home alone. But we have decided to enjoy our retirement together in this house after his retirement. The location is great and comfortable. Regarding work, my colleagues warmly welcomed me back after a long leave. I plan to continue working for a bit longer, focusing on patient care and training new staff. I'm eagerly looking forward to the future where I can spend every day with my husband. It's wonderful to have met such a loving partner. Thank you.